In business today, three things to know. First, they are calling it war. NATO says as many as 1,000 Russian troops are in the Ukraine, marching through the southeast of the country. The president speaks late in the afternoon. Then, what's next for the markets? Record highs all week and still no summer correction. Is it coming? And the street is the new mall. How gourmet food carts are selling everything from coffee to aspirin. Arise Exchange starts now. Hello, everyone. I'm Andrew Schmertz. A busy day of afternoon news. We'll get to the Ukraine in a moment. But first, late this afternoon, President Obama held a news conference about the Islamic State, known as ISIS, announcing stepped-up efforts to push them back in Iraq and Syria. Here's a little bit of what the president had to say.
Because of our strikes, the terrorists of ISIL are losing arms and equipment. In some areas, Iraqi government and Kurdish forces have begun to push them back, and we continue to be proud and grateful to our extraordinary personnel serving in this mission.
Arise News senior Washington correspondent Colin Cambell is in D.C. with more. Good afternoon, Colin.
How you doing, Andrew? We have President Obama talking about not only ISIL or ISIS or IS, as they've most been recently called, but also the economy and the Ukraine. Now, the president said that he will ask for a broader regional effort in dealing with IS, of course. He's asking the Iraq government to take more of an instrumental role in trying to push them back. He also said that he would not be coordinating with the Assad regime in Syria in order to battle IS, but he says this is a very key group that needs to be dealt with as they threaten very regional interests. He says that he's also fortifying the U.S. embassies in the area. He also wants to strengthen the infrastructure, and he says that IS is a big threat to all of that, Andrew.
Okay, Colin Cambell in Washington, and you'll have more, I know, at 6 o'clock on Arise America.
We
Thank
sure
you.
will. You're
okay,
welcome.
Now to the Ukraine, which is calling Russian action a full-scale invasion. NATO now estimates that 1,000 or more Russian troops are operating in the southeast of Ukraine as part of an effort to boost Russian separatists and battle back Ukrainian forces. Rebels are said to be fighting on two fronts, in the southeast and along the southern coast. This has jazzed up the United Nations, which held an emergency meeting of the Security Council, and Mr. Obama addressed this crisis as well today from the White House.
Russia has deliberately and repeatedly violated the sovereignty and territorial integrity of Ukraine. And the new images of Russian forces inside Ukraine make that plain for the world to see.
Ivan Eland is the director of the Center on Peace and Liberty at the Independent Institute. Ivan has spent a lot of time talking with us about this. Can you update us on what has changed in Ukraine with Russia over the past few days?
Well, I think the Russians are probably becoming more, assertive about their activities because the Ukrainian forces were on the advantage. They had the advantage going in, and I think the Russians are more actively helping the separatists at this point.
And so the president has spoken again that they have illegally gone into Ukraine. The question is, what we have done, has it had any impact on Russia at all?
Well, I think the sanctions do put pressure on Russia, but the problem is with sanctions, they can only have small, effect when the goals are small. This is fairly a large goal for sanctions, and that is to get Russia out of the Ukraine or out of Crimea. Very frankly, the U.S. doesn't have much empathy for Russia. Russia lost 25 million dead in World War II. And so they're trying to create a buffer zone in the near abroad or, Eastern Europe. And NATO has repeatedly expanded its efforts, its alliance to the east, and it's right on the Russian border. And also, recently, Ukraine has always been very important, both economically and politically, to Russia, and yet the pro-Russian government was overthrown by street protests, and so the Russians are really trying to salvage all they can out of Ukraine. They're doing this from a position of weakness rather than strength. So I think there needs to be some empathy on the part of the U.S. I think what we really need to do is see a federalist structure of federalism, meaning autonomy for eastern Ukraine so that they can have independence from the Ukrainian government. And I think that's the solution at this point.
Do you think, though, Vladimir Putin is looking at the sanctions and looking at nationalistic activities, and he's kind of weighing the political environment that he's in and betting that nationalism is going to win out here? Because those sanctions have hurt.
Well, of course, Putin is a nationalist character. He was created by the fact that the U.S. And NATO expanded, and so now you have to deal with a nationalist leader. And, of course, he's going to put nationalism over economics. And the economic sanctions are indirectly hurting Russia, not so much the government measures, but the fact that they chill private investment in Russia, and also they create this idea that there may be an asset freeze in the West, and therefore lots of Russians are pulling their money out of London and everywhere else. So I think the private indirect sanctions are more effective, but the problem is economic sanctions are economic means to achieve a political end, and they almost never achieve their political end unless it's really modest. And this is fairly robust goal for sanctions, and that is to get Putin out of eastern Ukraine and out of Crimea. And I don't think that's going to happen. I think the nationalism even trumps money making a lot of times.
Well, when NATO, is meeting next week, what do you think NATO is going to either say about this or do about this? I know sanctions are certainly going to be on the table. Is there any risk of a broader military action?
I don't think so. Russia has lots of nuclear weapons, and so does the United States. And I think that this is their sphere of influence. In the U.S., even during the hardline Reagan administration, stayed away from directly intervening in Eastern Europe and Poland. So I don't think you're going to see that here. I think you may see some additional sanctions simply because the Russians are increasing their activity in the Ukraine to try to beat back this Ukrainian offensive, which has gained ground against the separatists.
Okay, Ivan Eland, the director of the Center on Peace and Liberty at the Independent Institute, thank you so much, as always, for your thoughts. Stocks dropped from the opening bell on Thursday as worries about Ukraine overshadowed some decent economic news. Let's take a look at the final numbers. The Dow Jones Industrial Average down 40.97. It was down triple digits earlier in the day. The S&P 500 pulling back as well, below the 2,000 level after several days of record highs, and the Nasdaq off by about 12 points to 4557.69. Taking a look at some of the top stocks we're watching today, the nation's #1 discount retailer, Dollar General, says it remains committed to acquiring Family Dollar. Family Dollar had rejected a $9 billion buyout offer from Dollar General last week. Dollar General closing up 50 cents. A U.S. district judge denying Apple's request to stop rival Samsung from selling infringing features on its smartphones. This despite Apple winning a $120 million jury verdict against Samsung over 3 of its patents. Apple closing up 12 cents to 102.25. And American Express and Discover topped the list in J.D. Power's annual report on credit card satisfaction. After 7 years of topping the list of America's favorite credit cards, American Express finally has some competition. Amex closing down 22 cents to 89 and change. Taking a look at commodities, gold closing down and oil closing at 94.65 a barrel. In some other economic news today, new applications for jobless benefits dropped again near record lows in the latest sign that the job market may be improving. Claims fell by 1,000 to a seasonally adjusted 298,000 for the week ending August 23rd. And pending home sales rose by more than 3% in July to its highest level in almost a year. Sales rose to 105.9 in July compared with 102.5 in June. Well, for more on the market, we turn now to our friend Sam Stovall. He is Chief Equity Strategist with S&P Capital IQ. Sam, a lot of international news out there, and we've discussed this before, that the U.S. equities not paying too much attention to what's going on in Ukraine and maybe the Middle East, other than sort of the day-to-day hiccups. Is that what basically happened today?
Yeah, I think so. I think also that we hit the 2,000 level on the S&P 500. Really, the market was just focused on eclipsing that threshold. So maybe it's just taking a couple of day breather before it starts to move its way higher. If you look to the past, whenever the S&P broke above the 500, 1,000, 1,500 level, we were up about 5% in 1 month after.
Was that 2000 level a technical level and that it broke through? Where do you see the next technical level?
It's not so much a technical level as it is a level of confidence, because investors have been in this bull market now for 5.5 years. They're sort of wondering, is this bull market getting old? But no, they're being reminded that they're doing the right thing, that the trend is your friend, and we've now eclipsed another millennium mark.
The market will move higher if new money continues to come in. Is that the sense we're getting here, that people taking any sort of profits are still being offset by the new investment dollars coming in?
Yeah, I think so. You have people who are throwing in the towel. That's why the old saying is that the bull market takes the stairs, but the bear market takes the elevator. We have a lot of fund managers coming back from vacation, and right now S&P Capital IQ market mutual fund research says that about 80% of the active managers are underperforming the S&P versus a longer-term average of 73%. So you might have more people who say, I really got to turn on the afterburners in order to catch up and get my bonus by the end of the year.
And then is the risk at the end of the year that you hop on the elevator, because we kept hearing about some sort of summer correction, and we just haven't had one, have we?
No, we haven't. And every time somebody jumps the gun, they end up shooting themselves in the foot, as I like to say. And so, yeah, maybe we end up having that digestion in the beginning of next year. Who knows? Or it happens along the way.
Janet Yellen spoke at a conference at Jackson Hole, Wyoming. Did she say anything to upset the apple cart? I take it she didn't, because the markets didn't react on what the Fed is thinking.
No, I think she's letting us know that it's going to be very data dependent, that actually, in a sense, they know how to fight inflation. They don't know how to fight deflation. So they really don't want to upset the apple cart, the fragile economic recovery, by raising rates too quickly. So while some people think it could be March of this year when they start to raise rates, our belief is it's going to probably be June or maybe even the third quarter of next year.
Of 2015. So we could be looking at another year of super low interest rates. But then you saw, the argument from the hawks on the Fed that they're going to get behind the ball here, that the economy, they revised the GDP numbers up a little bit, that the economy is really better than we think. Some say it's worse than we think. That inflation, though, is higher than we think. And that's a legitimate argument, in that they're going to get stuck. What is the risk there?
Well, we're going to find out tomorrow. The PCE, Personal Consumption Expenditure Index, comes out tomorrow. That's the Fed's favorite indicator.
Why is it the Fed's favorite?
I think it's because it incorporates the factors that they're most interested in. Headlines CPI has been around since 1948. Core CPI, which strips out food and energy, has been around since the late 50s. Yeah. And I think that they just feel that the personal consumption expenditure is a more reliable indicator. And right now, that's still at or below the target that they would like to see. So they're just going to sort of sit back, and they're not worried yet about inflation becoming too hot.
Sam Stovall, Chief Equity Strategist with S&P Capital IQ. As always, thank you. And thank you for coming in here today, too. Good to see you. Coming up, spurring new business in Africa. We'll speak with a former ambassador who is among those leading the cause. You're watching Arise Exchange.
I don't think the television news in the United States reflects the diversity of the world. I don't think it does a great job of even reflecting the diversity of the United States.
When you are watching TV, you don't really see a lot of different cultures. There are plenty of other places that people might not even know about.
We are living in a global culture, and you cannot hide news that is happening when there's so much social media.
Arise News, every culture, every angle.
I think news does make people put things in black and white terms, just so that they have a dividing line between what their viewers like and dislike.
When they see a person of color, they either think that they're not going to do anything, they're either on drugs, or they got pregnant at an early age. And I just want to say that that's not true.
It tends to reflect more the interests of the upper income people and the upper income interests.
Arise News, every culture, every angle.
Welcome back to Arise Exchange. More than 45 heads of states and hundreds of business leaders from Africa and around the world recently convened in Washington, D.C. at the U.S.-Africa Summit. I sat down with world-renowned policy leader and expert on African affairs, Jene Frazier, who talked about the continent's emerging economy.
Well, the U.S.-Africa Leaders Summit was part of the Africa Growth and Opportunity Act, which was intended to both promote export-led growth in Africa as well as increase U.S.-African engagement and partnership. And mandated within that legislation was a head of state summit. And now that was in 2010 or 2000 when it was put in place, and now 14 years later we're actually getting there. So it's really significant, and the hope of those of us who work on Africa is that this summit will repeat itself, because it really does offer an opportunity not only for the presidents to speak, but for civil society, for the private sector, from at the ministerial level, for everyone to come together and really have a serious engagement on Africa. So it's very, very important.
And you say it's finally coming together, which posed the question, really, are we playing catch up to countries like China and to certain countries in Europe? The criticism has been we have fallen far behind because we focused a lot on aid and not on development.
Well, there's always been an important focus of American business in Africa. Certainly oil and gas is the one that people think about, but business has always been there. I do think that having this large forum, yes, clearly Japan has had forums, China's had a number of forums, and so America certainly is behind on having a forum, but I don't believe that we're behind in terms of engagement. We can do more. Certainly, different administrations have done more or less, but hopefully with this forum, as well as the focus that President Obama has brought to Africa since his trip last summer, we'll see that a continuation of the level of engagements that I think we had in the Bush administration and even in the Clinton administration.
I want to get back to that in a moment, but you were very involved in ending conflict or helping to end conflict in various areas in Africa. Conflict is still a problem, isn't it? And you're not ever going to get the economic development if you continue to have fighting. What more can this administration do when it comes to conflict in Africa?
Well, I actually think President Obama has done very well, although it's been quiet. The support for African peacekeepers has continued. None of those initiatives have gone away, and those initiatives were built on from the Clinton administration, increased money during the Bush administration, and even additional engagement from the Obama administration. So on the peacekeeping front, we've continued to be very proactive. We're also working on the counterterrorism front. I think they've had a very strong support for the Somali government. They're continuing to work with the Nigerian government and others across the Sahel. And so I think that it's really about building and strengthening the capacity of African countries as well as the region as a whole to work together to counter these threats, transnational threats in general, but certainly conflict in creating that collective security framework through African peacekeeping capacity.
You're, of course, in the private sector now as well, focusing on agriculture. And agriculture is such an important issue in Africa. And is part of that a technology solution in agriculture that's maybe lagging behind?
Yeah, it is. So what I'm specifically doing through a company called Africa Xchange Holdings Company is helping to build commodity exchanges, both in Nigeria, which is Africa's largest market, but also in East Africa, which is Africa's most integrated market. And the technology solution that we bring is actually a NASDAQ electronic trading platform. And NASDAQ trading platform means that you can trade on our exchange from anywhere in the world. You can trade from your bedroom. Right. You can trade from your office. You can trade. We have a trading floor as well, but you don't have to have a trading floor. You can trade from the airport. So it really is trying to integrate the market through technology.
Jene Frazier. Time now for our business ticker stories making headlines across the nation. Folks on Wall Street may be changing their passwords after a big security breach. The FBI and Secret Service are launching an investigation into a cyber attack on 5 banks. Now, the names of the banks remain anonymous. However, employees at JPMorgan Chase have reportedly confirmed that their bank was a target. The hackers reportedly stole a large amount of data, including customers' checking and savings account information. Land of fewer opportunities, at least if you're coming from China. For the first time ever, visas available to Chinese investors trying to become U.S. residents have run out. The Department of State says the maximum number of visas for this year has been reached, and it won't be processing further applications effective immediately. And speaking of China, the head of Microsoft is headed there. Company CEO Satya Nadella is reportedly scheduled to travel to China, where his company is the target of an antitrust investigation. Neither Microsoft nor Chinese officials are commenting. And here's something truly appetizing. winning Taco Bell food for life. Customers who find a special everlasting dollar in their Taco Bell dollar meal will win a $10,000 Taco Bell gift card. That will feed you a taco every day for 46 years, providing your arteries don't clog first. Coming up, a televangelist's idea as to why Robin Williams committed suicide makes him our favorite person of the day. You're watching Arise Exchange.
Looking at mainstream news stations where only you have a very small minority of people of color being newscasters and actually having prominent roles in the media.
In a newsroom in the United States, maybe 10% of decision makers come from communities of diversity. That's not right.
Well, diversity is important because the more complete the news is, the more accurate a picture you're getting of the world, and the more you can form an accurate opinion of things.
The vision here is not just to tell the main stories of the day, but to tell the news that other organizations don't tell, and tell it in a way that people like me, people that look like me, that look like you, are interested in.
Arise News.
Arise News.
Arise News.
Arise News. Arise News, every culture, every angle.
I have never worked for a news organization like Arise News. The vision here is not just to tell the main stories of the day, but to tell the news that other organizations don't tell, and tell it in a way that people that look like me, that look like you, are interested in. In this news organization, everybody's opinion counts. There is no big I's and little U's. Every angle, every perspective matters, and that's freeing in so many ways.
Time now for our favorite person of the day, when we pick one person who grabbed our attention, and not for the right reasons. Today, it is Pat Robertson once again. He's a frequent winner of the award. Reverend Robertson has provided his own unique take on why Robin Williams committed suicide. It's because, quote, the heathen worship false gods like fame and money. Here he is in his own words.
You see these very popular people in the media who commit suicide, like Robin Williams recently, and you say, what is the deal with him? What happened? You find people who are at the top of the game in music and they're strung out on drugs. What happened? What was their God? Well, you see, the God of the heathen are idols. And everything that you seek in life can ruin you.
Robertson then concluded by asking people to call him so he can send them a compact disc that apparently will lead you to Christ. Pray to the compact disc. He even explained how to use it in your car radio. And so Pat Robertson is our favorite person of the day. Coming up next, why your next purchase may come from a truck on the side of a road. You're watching Arise Exchange.
If I was building my own news network, first thing I think I'd want high-quality reporters, very educated, intelligent people.
Hello, I'm Francesca Maxime.
I'm Julian Phillips.
I'm Wendy Gillette.
I'm Sophia Songhai.
I'm Gary Anthony Ramsey. Thank you for joining us here in New York City.
I would like to see more people of color represented in high positions in media.
We've got world-class journalists, veteran journalists who have been in this industry for decades, not just in front of the camera, but behind the scenes as well.
People need to understand the problems that are going on in the community are much closer than we actually think they are.
Kayla Phillips is one of the shoppers who is suing Barney's, and she is here with her attorney. What is it that you want from them?
Not to judge every African-American person that comes in your store.
Mainstream news has covered all of the issues of the world, which are like this, through a very narrow lens. And at Arise News, we do things different. We cover every culture, every angle. Our mission is to go to these places, to these communities, whether they're in Africa, whether they're in Europe, Asia, the United States, the Caribbean. And we're going to find these stories, and we're going to tell them to our audience. stories that they've probably never heard of before, and stories that they'll find interesting and engaging.
I think news does make people put things in black and white terms just so that they have a dividing line between what their viewers like and dislike.
When they see a person of color, they either think that they're not going to do anything, they're either on drugs or they got pregnant at an early age, and I just want to say that that's not true.
It tends to reflect more the interests of the upper income people and the upper income interests.
Arise News, every culture, every angle.
If you live in a big city, you know that it is one of the hottest new business ventures that's adding a big boost to the economy. Food trucks. Experts say, unlike the restaurant business, where 25% fail in their first year and 60% in their first 3 years, setting up a food truck is quicker, less expensive, and less risky. And our next guest knows all about this. Jene Fairchild is the CEO of Second to None Leasing and owns more than a dozen trucks. John, welcome to Arise Xchange. I know you operate trucks that largely sell coffee, but I'm seeing this huge change in sort of this gourmet truck industry. I mean, you can now get lobster rolls and Philly cheesesteak sandwiches. What do you think is driving sort of this new food trucks that aren't our grandfather's food trucks?
Well, I just think the convenience and the quickness. I mean, especially in New York, we're in a bang-bang society, and you could walk up to a truck and have a lobster roll in 5 minutes. Mm-hmm. You could walk up to my truck and have breakfast, egg sandwich, a cup of coffee, and a donut in 2 minutes.
Now, you've been in the food industry most of your life, so how did you decide then to kind of pivot and go into what I guess is the mobile food industry?
A good friend of mine was always trying to recruit me. He just thought that I had what it would take with my personality and my business sense and my deli background. He just figured I'd be a natural, and he was right.
I imagine that one of the reasons restaurants fail is the huge amount of overhead of paying rent, et cetera. Talk about how that sort of goes away here, but some of the other challenges you might face being a mobile entity.
Well, yeah, you're exactly right. I mean, the cost is much less, and whereas a restaurant has to wait for customers to walk through the door, we could kind of go to them more or less, especially in my business.
Yeah, what's interesting is your business goes to individual companies.
Yes. We have a route set up where we go from different business to different business throughout the day. We serve them for breakfast, then we reload for lunch, and then we go hit them again.
Is this fair, though, to the restaurant industry? Because I could hear people who own restaurants and to see the food trucks park nearby. It's obvious competition that they're not on a level playing field with.
Well, I mean, there's competition with everything. You just have to step your game up. I mean, whoever has the best product, and they're going to get the business.
How is this industry regulated? Can anybody get a truck and start selling food out of it?
Well, first off, you need to have out in Long Island, Suffolk County, you need a Board of Health certificate. And then as far as these trucks, we all kind of just respect each other's boundaries. It's not regulated by anybody, really.
Can you drive, and especially here in New York, can you just park anywhere on a corner and set up?
In the city, I know it's regulated through the city and all those regulations. But on Long Island, I mean, I have such a rapport with these businesses that, if somebody else tried to come up, they would almost reject them because they'd be like, wait, you're not my guy. Like, they see me 5 days a week, 365 days a year.
This is a cash business. How much cash? Can you talk a little bit about how much cash you can pull in on an individual food truck?
I mean, it's a hustle. It's, again, how good you are and what you're offering. I offer sandwiches, grilled chicken paninis. I have pizza at lunch. So the more variety you're offering.
And do you employ a different type of restaurant worker than necessarily a worker inside a restaurant?
Yeah,
different
it would.
Personality?
Yeah, it would be. I mean, it's kind of a unique blend of personality, business sense, food background. Because we've had numerous employees work for us, and they don't make it. They won't put enough food on. They'll show up late. There's so many variables, and then at the end of the week, there's no money.
Okay, so what's next for you? We have about 20 seconds left. We see this in big cities. Is this something that could go into the suburbs as well?
I don't know about the suburb. I mean, It's right for me on Long Island with these businesses employing hundreds of employees, and they need a quick 15-minute break for breakfast. So it's a perfect fit for me.
And I would say in New York, it's a lot easier going out on the street and finding something to eat than on Long Island and hitting the roads and the traffic. John Fairchild,
Absolutely
owner of
right.
Second to None Leasing Company. Thank you for coming in.
Thank you.
Tomorrow on the Rise Exchange, we'll talk about the business of relief, how people are providing assistance to those in need, and how that has become a big business. Let's take a look at the markets. A down day, a little bit of a pullback for Wall Street, largely because of what's going on in Ukraine and the Middle East right now. We'll see how that shakes out tomorrow. That's the Rise Exchange. I'm Andrew Schmertz. Have a good evening.